The sun was a hammer and the land was the anvil. The sky was a hard, white blue, bleached of all mercy. Heat rippled up from the baked red earth of the Arizona territory, so thick you could almost see it shimmer like water. Only this was a mirage that promised nothing but thirst. Inside the stagecoach, Lena Hart felt the grit settle on her skin. It was in her mouth, on her eyelashes, and down the collar of her best gray traveling dress, a dress already ruined by the fine, pervasive dust. She was 23 years old, though in the last 6 months she had come to feel much older. She was a schoolteacher, or had been, and intended to be one again. She was traveling from the civilized green hills of Pennsylvania to the ragged edge of the map, to a place called Red Rock. She was running, not from the law, not from poverty, but from a memory. A memory of a man in a fine waistcoat who smelled of bay rum and promises. A man who had held her hand in a Philadelphia ballroom and sworn she was his only one. He had sworn it right up until the day his engagement to an heiress with $20,000 to her name was announced in the papers. Lena pressed her lips together, a thin white line against the grime on her face. Love, she had concluded, was a lie. A convenient story people, especially men, told to get what they wanted. What she wanted now was simple: a small house, a classroom of children who needed their letters, and a life that depended on no one but herself. She would never be a fool for a man's sweet words again. The coach listed violently, throwing her against the worn leather padding. Opposite her, a drummer in a sweat-stained suit grunted. "Damnation," the man muttered, wiping his face with a soiled handkerchief. "Begging your pardon, miss. This country ain't fit for hogs, let alone ladies." Lena offered him a tight, polite nod. She had not spoken more than 10 words since boarding at the last stop. She had learned that silence was a woman's best defense in a coach full of strangers. She turned her gaze back to the window, ignoring the drummer and the 2 rough-looking cowboys slumped in the far corner, hats pulled low. The landscape was brutal, but it was magnificent. Great mesas of red rock rose up like castles built by giants, their sides carved by wind and time. The scale of it made her feel small, which she found strangely comforting. A small person with a small, broken heart did not matter much out here. Then she saw him. He was high up, on the rim of a mesa that stood miles away. Yet he was as clear as a woodcut. A single rider on a horse, perfectly still. He was too far to see any detail, but the shape was unmistakable. He was not a cowboy. He wore no hat. He sat the horse as if he were part of it, a seamless, dark silhouette against the vast, burning sky. A chill ran down Lena's back, a prickle of sweat and fear that had nothing to do with the heat. He was just watching. The driver, a leathery man named Jeb, had an outrider with him, a younger man with a repeating rifle across his lap. The outrider, Billy, had been quiet for the last hour. Suddenly, he spoke, his voice low and tight. "Jeb, we got company. High Ridge, 11 o'clock. The drummer's head snapped up. He squinted out the window, his bravado gone. "What?" "We're Indians." Jeb's voice, a gravelly rasp, carried back from the box. "Keep your pants on. Mister, it's just one. He's been there for the last hour." Lena looked back. The rider had not moved. "That's Navajo land," Billy said, his voice barely audible over the rumble of the wheels and the jingle of the harness. "They're watching us, or watching their land. Navajo," the drummer spat, as if the word tasted bad. He hitched his trousers. "Savages. The army ought to clear 'em out. Make way for progress." The older of the 2 cowboys finally spoke. His voice was a slow, dry drawl. "Progress." He said the word like it was a joke. "You mean the railroad?" "And what if I do?" the drummer shot back. "Emboldened. That railroad is civilization. It's what's going to make this godforsaken Dust Bowl worth something. It's what Silas Kane is bringing." The name fell into the coach like a stone. Silas Kane, even back east. Lena had heard of him. A titan. The newspapers called him. A man building an empire of iron and steam. "He's a man of vision," the drummer said, puffing up his chest. The second cowboy, younger than the first, laughed a short, bitter bark. "He's a man of greed," is what Heard in Tucson he's aiming to run his line straight through the Donetta, the Sacred Valley. Don't care what no treaty says. Treaties, the drummer scoffed. You can't stop progress with a piece of paper. Kane's got the governor in his pocket. Got half the cavalry, too, from what I hear. He'll clear those savages out, one way or another. Push him into some patch of badlands that won't even grow rocks. Lena felt a twist of distaste. She had no opinion on the railroad. But the man's casual cruelty turned her stomach. She was here to teach children, to build a small, quiet life. She wanted no part of Silas Kane's politics, or the Army's wars, or the plight of the Navajo. She just wanted to be left alone. Her mind drifted back, unbidden, to Robert, to his soft hands and his easy lies. He, too, had spoken of progress, of his career, of the practicalities of a good match. He had called her his heart, and then he had sold his heart for a bigger share of his father-in-law's shipping business. Men were all the same, she thought. Whether they wore buckskin or broadcloth, they took what they wanted. Love is the lie they tell to hide their greed. She repeated the bitter mantra to herself. Her only goal was to be safe, fed, and dependent on no man. She would not be bound again. Suddenly, the coach lurched to a halt, throwing them all forward. The springs groaned in protest. Lena caught herself against the seat, her heart leaping into her throat. "What is thunder?" the drummer yelped, fumbling for a pistol inside his coat. Outside, the silence of the desert rushed in, heavy and absolute. Jeb Billy, the outrider, called. His voice was sharp with alarm. "Hold your fire!" Jeb's voice came back, low and tense. Something ain't right. Lena peered out the window. They were in a shallow dip, the trail ahead obscured by a knot of greasewood and palo verde. Jeb had climbed down from the box. He was standing in the middle of the trail, staring at the ground. "What is it?" the older cowboy asked. "Leading out. Tracks." Jeb said. He knelt, tracing something in the dust. "Shod horses. Army. 12, maybe more. Rode hard. So the drummer demanded, his face pale. It's the cavalry. They're here to protect us." "Maybe," Jeb said, standing up. He walked a few paces off the trail, his boots crunching on the gravel. He bent over and picked something up, something that glinted in the merciless sun. He held it up. It was a cavalry helmet, a dented, brass-plated helmet, its horsehair plume torn away. It was caked in dust and something dark. A fly buzzed inside the coach. The heat was suffocating. "They don't usually run patrols this far south," Jeb said, his voice flat. "Not on this route. Not unless they're hunting someone. Or," the older cowboy said quietly, "unless someone's hunting them." Lena's eyes were drawn back to the high ridge. The silhouette was gone. The drummer was sweating profusely now. "Hunting who, the Navajo, maybe?" The cowboy replied. He and his partner exchanged a look Lena could not read. "Or maybe they're hunting Cale Nez." Cale Nez, the drummer, whispered the name. "I've heard of him. A renegade. A savage." "He ain't a savage," the younger cowboy said. Almost too quiet to hear. "He's Navajo. Served as a scout for the Army. Back before, helped him track the Apache. They say he can read the land like a man reads a book. Knows every rock and every shadow." "Then why'd he go renegade?" the drummer asked. "He went home," the older cowboy said. He looked out the window, his eyes on the distant mesas. Went home and found Silas Kane's survey stakes planted in his grandfather's cornfield. Found out the army he scouted for was the same army protecting the men stealing his land. He told the colonel, or so the story goes, that this land was not for sale. Then he just rode away. "He's a killer," the drummer insisted. "He's a man protecting his home." The cowboy countered. "Silas Kane put a bounty on him. Calls him a rebel. But the Navajo call him a warrior. He's been a thorn in Kane's side for near a year." Lena listened to this, her skin cold despite the heat. It sounded like a story from a dime novel, wild tales to frighten travelers. She was a practical woman. She did not believe in heroes, and she certainly did not believe in renegades who fought for honor. She believed in salaries, and contracts, and the deed to a small piece of land in her own name. "This is all nonsense," a new voice said. It was a woman, a stern-looking widow in black bombazine who had not spoken the entire trip. The Indians are godless heathens. They kill and they steal. It is our Christian duty to tame them or remove them. Ma'am, the older cowboy said, touching the brim of his hat with a surprising gentleness. I've knowed white men who'd steal the pennies off a dead man's eyes and quote scripture while doing it. And I've knowed Indians who'd keep their word if it killed 'em. It ain't about the color of the skin. It's about the heart. Blasphemy, the widow hissed, clutching a small, leather-bound Bible. Lena looked away. The argument made her tired. She was still a woman from the East, and everything she had ever been taught told her that an Indian was dangerous, a wild, unpredictable force. But the widow's certainty was just as unsettling. Lena found herself in the uncomfortable middle, allied with no one, trusting nothing. "We're burning daylight," Jeb's voice boomed, breaking the tension. He threw the helmet into the boot of the coach and climbed back onto the box. "Whatever happened here, it's done. We push on to Red Rock. We should make it just after dark." The whip cracked, and the coach groaned back into motion. Faster this time. The sun began to dip, painting the clouds in violent strokes of orange and purple. The air cooled, but the tension inside the coach only grew. They were entering a canyon now, the trail narrowing, the great red walls rising up on either side, blotting out the sky. It was a perfect place for an ambush. The driver was pushing the horses hard. The animals lathered in sweat, their breath coming in ragged gasps. The rattle of the wheels echoed off the rock, sounding unnervingly loud in the sudden twilight. Lena stared out the window, her knuckles white as she gripped the leather strap. She saw him again. This time, he was not miles away. He was on the canyon rim, perhaps 200 yards above them. A rider, stark against the fading light. He was pacing them, his horse moving at an easy, fluid gait. She could not see his face, but she felt his gaze. It was not the impersonal stare of a distant guard. This was focused. This was personal. The drummer saw him too. Lord God, he breathed, his hand going to the pistol in his coat. He's right on top of us. The outrider, Billy, raised his rifle, sighting up the canyon wall. "Don't be a fool," Boy Jeb roared from the box. "You'll miss at this range, and you'll only make him mad. Just pray he's letting us pass." The coach plunged into a deeper shadow as the trail twisted. For a moment, the rider was lost to view. Lena held her breath, counting the seconds. Then he was back, in a gap between the rock formations, closer still. And Lena Hart, who had come west to escape the savagery of a civilized man's heart, realized her safety and her small, quiet life were about to be ripped apart by forces she could not begin to understand. The world exploded. The first shot was a deafening crack that echoed off the canyon walls, followed instantly by the whine of a bullet splintering the wooden frame of the coach, inches from Lena's head. She screamed, diving instinctively for the floor, colliding with the drummer who was already whimpering in a ball. Outside, men were yelling, not the ululating cries Lena had read about in dime novels, but harsh, barked commands in English. "Get the strongbox, check for the mail and the whiskey, find the whiskey." The coach horses screamed in terror. More shots peppered the carriage, punching holes through the thin metal panels. The widow in black began to pray. A high, thin wail. "Indian attack," the drummer shrieked from the floor. "Lord save us." It's an Indian attack, but Lena, pressed against the filthy floorboards, had seen the men who swarmed the coach. They were white. They wore the tattered remnants of blue cavalry coats, mixed with greasy buckskins and civilian shirts. Their faces were grimy with dirt and rage. One of them, a man with a scarred face and a sergeant's stripes on his torn jacket, wrenched the driver's door open. Jeb, the driver, lay slumped over the side, unmoving. "Out, everyone, out," the scarred man roared, waving a heavy dragoon pistol. The passengers tumbled out, hands raised. The two cowboys, their faces grim, moved to shield Lena and the widow. "What do you want?" the older cowboy asked, his voice steady. "Everything you got," a second man snarled, leveling a rifle. "But first, we're looking for a delivery. Something for Silas Kane." The scarred leader shoved the drummer aside. "Heard there was a witness coming through. Or maybe papers. Where are they? He began to rip open mailbags, scattering letters in the dust. The drummer, his face the color of ash, pointed a shaking finger up at the rim of the canyon. Indians, look. A single rider was still there, the one they had seen before. Cale Nez, the scarred man laughed. A raw, ugly sound. One buck ain't gonna stop us. Fire at will, boys, and for God's sakes, shoutin' for Silas Kane. One of the attackers, positioned on a rock above the coach, raised his rifle. He was not aiming at the passengers. He was aiming at the lone rider on the rim. Before he could fire, something moved in the air. A silent, impossibly fast streak. An arrow. It struck the rifleman in the chest with a sound like a heavy punch. He gave a short, surprised grunt and toppled forward into the dust. Chaos erupted. From the rocks above, 2 more Navajo warriors appeared, materializing from the stone itself. They were on foot, moving with a speed that defied belief. Cale Nez was no longer on the rim. He was on horseback, charging down a narrow game trail Lena had not even seen. He rode low on his horse, a war club in one hand. He did not shout. He was a silent, avenging force. The passengers, caught in the crossfire, screamed and scrambled for cover behind the stopped coach. They only saw more violence, more weapons. They saw a savage attacking white men. Cale was on the scarred leader before the man could turn. The war club swung, a blur of motion, and connected with the man's pistol hand, shattering the bone. The man howled. Cale's horse reared, its hooves lashing out. It was not a battle. It was a rout. The attackers, who had been so bold against unarmed passengers, scattered like quail before these 3 silent warriors. They were not soldiers. They were cutthroats, and they had no stomach for a real fight. The scarred leader, clutching his ruined hand, scrambled onto a horse and spurred it down the canyon before he vanished into the dust. He looked back, his eyes full of hate and pain. Locked on the coach, he saw Lena, her face white, her eyes wide, staring at him from behind the cowboy's shoulder. She had seen it all. She had heard the name. "Don't let that one live," he screamed at his retreating men, pointing directly at Lena. She saw my face. She saw me. He was gone. The dust settled. The silence of the canyon returned, broken only by the whimpering of the drummer and the harsh breathing of the passengers. The cowboys raised their pistols, unsure where to aim. The 2 Navajo warriors on foot were already retrieving their arrows, their faces blank stone. Cale Nez sat on his horse, 20 yards away. His chest rose and fell. He had heard the man's final order. He looked from the spot where the attacker had disappeared to the white woman huddled by the coach. She was a witness. She was now a target. He made his decision in the span of a single heartbeat. He urged his horse forward. The cowboys tensed, raising their weapons. "Hold on," the older cowboy said. "He just saved our hides." Cale ignored him. He rode straight to the coach door. Lena, still shaking, looked up at him. He was terrifying. His face was streaked with sweat and dust, his eyes black and intense. He was all muscle and leather and latent power. He reached down, his arm like iron, and grabbed the front of her dress. "No," she screamed, her voice cracking. He did not pull her up. He yanked open the damaged door and pointed. "Get on, now!" "What? No, I will not." She thought he was taking her prisoner. "Get on the horse," he commanded. He had no time for this. He dismounted in one fluid motion, grabbed her around the waist, and bodily lifted her. Lena fought him. She clawed at his face, kicked his shins, and shrieked with a terror that was absolute. "Savage, let me go, help me," she cried to the cowboys. Cale threw her sideways onto his horse's back, uncaring of her modesty. He swung up behind her, his hard body pinning her against the horse's neck. "If you stay, they will kill you," he said, his voice a low growl in her ear. "I have no time to explain." He kicked the horse, and the animal leaped forward, scrambling up the rocky incline. "He's taking her," the widow shrieked, pointing. "He's abducting her, the savage shoot him." The younger cowboy raised his rifle, then lowered it. "Ma'am, I ain't at all sure what just happened, but I ain't shooting the man who just saved us." Lena, half sobbing, half furious, beat her fists against the warrior's chest. He was like hitting a rock wall. He ignored her, in a terrifying, desperate move. She tried to throw herself from the galloping horse. He caught her, his arm locking around her waist like a steel band. With his other hand, he reined the horse to a halt on a high ledge overlooking the canyon. He was breathing hard now, his patience gone. "Be still," he commanded. "Let me go," she spat, her face wet with tears and dust. "You savage, you animal. Take me back to my people." He grabbed her chin, forcing her to look at him. His black eyes burned into hers. "Your people just tried to kill you," he said, his voice flat and cold. The words hit her with the force of a physical blow. She froze. He released her, his face a mask of frustration. He had to keep her from fighting him off the horse. He pulled a leather thong from his belt and, before she could react, bound her wrists. It was not tight, just enough to stop her from striking him or trying to jump. He did not touch her otherwise. He did not insult her. He simply secured her. Then he turned the horse and rode on, deeper into the Red Rock wilderness, leaving the stagecoach and everything Lena knew behind. As they rode, Cale's mind was a storm. He had not sought this. He had tried to live with the white man. He had worn their blue coat, eaten their salted meat, and guided their patrols. He had believed Colonel Miles, who had spoken of peace and shared land. Then Silas Kane had arrived with his money and his iron rails, and the treaties had become smoke. He had seen Kane's men, protected by the very soldiers he scouted for, burn a Navajo cornfield. He had seen his own people betrayed. So he had left. He had become a renegade simply by choosing to protect his home. And now this. A white woman. A Bilagana woman. She was a complication he did not need. His people were already suffering, hunted and afraid. Bringing her to the hidden valley was a risk. But he had heard the man's shout. He knew Kane's enforcer, Scar. He knew the man would not rest until the witness was silenced. To leave her was to sentence her to death, and that his own code of honor would not allow. He was a warrior. He did not leave the helpless to be slaughtered, not even if they were the color of his enemy. They rode for hours. The sun set, and a cold moon rose, silvering the canyon walls. Lena's terror had given way to a numb, bone-deep exhaustion. She was no longer crying. She was just cold and sore and lost. Finally, she saw fires. They rode into a small, hidden valley. It was not the war camp she'd imagined. There were no scalps, no prisoners tied to stakes. There were domed, earth-covered dwellings, hogans, a flock of sheep bleated in a brush corral. The air smelled of wood smoke and roasting corn. Cale rode into the center of the small village and stopped. People emerged from the dwellings, their dark faces unreadable in the firelight. They stared at Lena with open suspicion. An old man, his face a map of wrinkles, stepped forward. Cale dismounted and spoke in his own tongue, his voice low and urgent. He gestured back the way they had come, then at Lena. The old man listened, his expression grave. Cale turned and lifted Lena down from the horse. His touch was impersonal, firm. He used a small knife to cut the thong on her wrists. She rubbed her chafed skin, too tired to even be angry. A woman, her face hard, approached them. Cale spoke to her. The woman nodded curtly, then took Lena's arm in a none-too-gentle grip. She led Lena to a small, empty hogan. Inside, a small fire burned in a central pit. Sheepskins were piled for sleeping. It was clean. It was warm. It was a prison. The woman pointed to the skins, then to a gourd of water. Then she left, pulling a heavy blanket over the doorway. Lena was alone. She heard the murmur of voices outside, the stamp of horses. She heard, somewhere in the distance, a child laugh. The sound was so normal, it was terrifying. She sank onto the sheepskins, buried her face in her hands, and for the first time since her engagement had ended, she wept not from a broken heart, but from pure, undiluted fear. Miles away, in the lantern-lit chaos of Red Rock, a single rider galloped down the main street. He was one of the attackers. his arm in a crude sling. He reined his horse to a stop in front of the Gold Nugget Saloon, slid from the saddle, and staggered inside. The saloon was full. Men crowded the bar. At a corner table, Silas Kane was calmly playing poker with the territorial judge. The wounded man collapsed just inside the doors. "Help! Me!" he gasped. The saloon went quiet. "What is it, man?" the bartender asked, leaning over the bar. "Stagecoach," the man panted, his story well rehearsed. "It was Cale Nez, the renegade. He hit us, ambushed, killed the driver, slaughtered. God, the slaughter." A murmur of outrage swept the room. He took the woman," the man groaned, clutching his side. "The new school teacher. He took her. God knows what that savage is doing to her right now." Silas Kane slowly placed his cards face down on the table. He stood up, his face a mask of cold, righteous fury. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice ringing with authority, "this is an act of war against this town, against all of us. That savage, Cale Nez, has stolen a white woman. Our school teacher." He looked around the room, his eyes landing on every man. "We will not stand for it. We will not allow these heathens to defile our women and murder our citizens. At dawn, we ride. We ride to get her back." A roar of agreement filled the saloon. Lena Hart, the victim, was now the excuse. She was being protected by her captor, and she was about to be rescued by her real enemy. Lena awoke to the smell of smoke and unfamiliar herbs. Gray light filtered in through the smoke hole of the hogan. For a confused, terrified moment, she did not know where she was. Then the memory of the attack, the arrows, the man's voice shouting her name, and the brutal, terrifying ride came flooding back. She was a prisoner. The blanket was pushed aside. It was not the hard-faced woman from last night, but an older woman. Her face a web of kind wrinkles. She carried a wooden bowl that steamed. She set it down and motioned for Lena to eat. It was a thick corn mush, surprisingly savory. Lena was starving, and she ate, her pride forgotten. Later, the woman returned, this time with Cale Nez. He was followed by the old man Lena had seen last night, and two other older women. They sat on the sheepskins, forming a small circle. Lena's fear returned, cold and sharp. This was an interrogation. She drew her knees to her chest, her soiled gray dress, her only armor. The old man spoke first, his voice like stones rolling in a dry riverbed. Cale translated, his own voice flat, without emotion. "My grandfather, Old Bear, asks what you saw in the canyon." Lena's chin went up. "I am an American citizen. I am being held here against my will. I demand you take me to Red Rock. The law there will protect me." Cale's mouth quivered in a humorless line. He translated her words. The old man listened, then spoke again. "He asks," Cale said. "What law protects a lamb when the wolf is the judge? Silas Kane is not the judge," Lena retorted, though a seed of doubt had already been planted. "There are laws. There are procedures. I will not speak against. I will not speak at all until I am in Red Rock." The two women spoke, their voices sharp, questioning Cale. He answered them, his tone defensive. "They do not trust you," Cale said, his black eyes fixed on her. "They see a white woman, and they see the lies that follow. I am not lying. You are not speaking," he corrected her. "To my people, silence in the face of a crime is its own lie. They want to know who attacked you." "I don't know," she said, which was mostly true. "They were white men. They wore pieces of blue uniforms. And what name did they shout?" Cale asked, his voice suddenly sharp. Lena looked down. She remembered the scar-faced man's cry. For Silas Kane. To say it aloud felt like a betrayal, not of these people, but of her own world. If she admitted it, she was admitting that the civilization she was running to was just as rotten as the one she had fled. I'm not sure what I heard," she whispered. Cale stood up abruptly, his patience broken. "You are a fool. Then, you believe in paper laws, but you will not look at the blood on the ground." He grabbed her arm, not gently. She yelped as he pulled her to her feet and out of the hogan into the bright, cold morning. The village was nestled in a high valley, green and watered. a paradise hidden in the desert. But Cale did not stop. He marched her past the corrals, past the small, neat fields of corn, and up a trail. He did not speak for the half hour they climbed. He pulled her along, his grip bruising. Finally, they reached a ridge overlooking another, smaller valley. Lena put a hand to her mouth, a gasp of horror choking her. Below was a ruin. The charred skeletons of at least a dozen hogans smoked in the morning air. The ground was littered with the bodies of sheep and goats, slaughtered where they stood. A woman's dress, red calico, was snagged on a burnt shrub, a small, sad flag of defeat. "Who did this?" Lena whispered. "The army," Cale said, his voice dead. "2 days ago. They came from the east. They said they were punishing a raiders who stole cattle, but this was a herding camp, not a war camp. My uncle lived here, but—" "Why?" Why, Cale laughed. A bitter sound. He pointed, not at the ruin, but at the far side of the valley, near the canyon mouth. "Look." Lena squinted. At first she saw nothing. Then she saw them, a line of small, wooden stakes, driven into the earth. They were bright, new wood, stark against the red soil. "Survey stakes, the railroad," she said, understanding hitting her like a physical blow. "Silas Kane's men mark the land. When my people refuse to leave, he sends a complaint to the fort. A patrol comes. They say they are attacked. Or they find a stolen cow. And then," he gestured to the smoking ruin, "then they clear the land. This is the law you trust." Lena's legs felt weak. She sat down hard on a rock. The man in the fine waistcoat who had broken her heart, and the man in the torn cavalry coat who had tried to kill her, and the man named Silas Kane who burned villages. They were not different, she realized. They were the same. Men who took what they wanted. And the man standing beside her, the savage who had abducted her, he had done it to save her life. Her entire world was tipping on its axis. Everything she believed, everything she had been taught about civilized men and godless heathens, about law and savagery, was wrong. She felt a profound, dizzying sense of displacement. If the world she came from was the lie, and the world she was in was the enemy, then who was she? Where did she belong? She was a woman without a tribe, without a home, an outcast from both sides. I didn't know," she said, her voice small. "Now you do," Cale said. He turned and started back down the trail, leaving her to follow. They had been back in the main village for less than an hour when a scout was spotted on the high rim, signaling frantically. Cale's face went hard. He issued a sharp order. Women grabbed their children and vanished into the hogans. The few warriors, Cale among them, took up positions in the rocks above the valley entrance, armed with bows and a few old rifles. Lena was left alone in the center of the village, her heart pounding a sick rhythm against her ribs. Minutes later, a column of blue riders entered the valley. It was a cavalry patrol. A dozen men led by a young, overconfident lieutenant with a clean-shaven jaw. They carried a white flag of truce. The lieutenant reined in, his eyes scanning the village and landing on Lena, the only white person in sight. "Ma'am," he called, touching the brim of his hat. "Lieutenant Brody, United States Cavalry." "Thank God we'd found you. We're here to rescue you." Lena did not move. "Rescue?" The word sounded obscene. Cale stepped out from the rocks, his hands empty, his rifle left behind. He stood between Lena and the soldiers. "She is not a prisoner," Cale said in his clear, formal English. "Step aside. Indian," the lieutenant ordered, his hand resting on the butt of his pistol. "The lady is coming with us. We have reports you abducted her after your band massacred a stagecoach." "Your reports are wrong," Cale said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Are they?" The lieutenant smiled, a thin, patronizing smile. "Ma'am, are you unharmed? Are you here of your own free will?" Cale looked back at Lena. He understood, with chilling clarity, what was happening. If she went with them now, believing their lies, her story would be twisted. Her rescue would be the proof they needed. She would be the innocent white victim whose honor the army had to avenge. Her words would be the legal justification for leveling this valley. just as they had leveled his uncle's. Lena hesitated. This was her chance. This was the law. This was her people, her color, her world. Come to save her. All she had to do was walk to them. She could go back to Red Rock, back to her plan, but she could not forget the smoking ruin. She could not forget the survey stakes. And then she heard it. The lieutenant, believing he was out of earshot, turned in his saddle to speak to his sergeant. He kept his voice low, but the canyon walls and the dead silence of the valley carried the sound. "Stall him," the lieutenant muttered. "I don't want to start shooting until the rest of the company gets here. We rescue the girl, and then we have the excuse we need to level this entire valley. Silas will be very pleased." The blood drained from Lena's face. It was not a rescue. It was a pretext. The same lie, over and over. They were going to use her. Use her to justify a massacre. Use her as an excuse to steal this land. She was not a person to them. She was a tool, just as she had been to Robert. Cale was watching her, his face impossible to read. He had not heard, but he saw the change in her. He saw the color leave her face and the terror replaced by a new, cold stillness. "It is your choice, Bilagana," he said, his voice so low only she could hear it. "Go with them, or stay. But know this, if they attack, the blood spilled here today will not wash out." The lieutenant turned back to her, his smile fixed in place. "Ma'am, it's time to go. We won't let this savage keep you." Lena took a breath. She looked at the young officer, his clean uniform, his polite smile, and she saw the skull beneath the skin. She saw the lies and the greed and the fire. Then she looked at Cale, the renegade, the savage, the man who had saved her, and the man who had shown her the truth. She made her choice. She walked forward, but not to the lieutenant. She walked until she stood next to Cale, shoulder to shoulder. The patrol shifted, their rifles moving. "Ma'am, what are you doing?" the lieutenant demanded, his smile fading. "That man," Lena said, her voice shaking but clear as a bell, "is Cale Nez. He did not abduct me. He saved my life." The lieutenant was stunned into silence. The stagecoach was not attacked by Navajo. Lena continued, her voice gaining strength. "It was attacked by white men, men in scraps of your uniform. Men who shouted they were doing it for Silas Kane." "Ma'am, you must be confused," the lieutenant stammered, his plan unraveling. "You're hysterical. The trauma. I am a schoolteacher. Lieutenant, I am trained to observe. I will testify to what I saw. But I will not do it in a town owned by Silas Kane. And I will not do it at the point of your guns." She took a step closer to Cale. "I will go to Red Rock, but I will go with him, when we can be assured of a fair hearing, not an ambush." The lieutenant's face turned a dull, angry red. He was beaten, and he knew it. He could not open fire on a white woman who was calm, articulate, and publicly refusing his rescue. "You're making a terrible mistake. Miss," he snarled, "you've been brainwashed by him. You're a turncoat. I am a witness, lieutenant, and I will not be your excuse." He stared at her for a long, hateful moment. Then he gave a sharp order. "Patrol, we're moving out. Report back to the fort." "The woman refuses to be rescued. She is an accomplice." The soldiers wheeled their horses, their faces a mixture of confusion and disgust. They rode out of the valley, leaving a cloud of dust and a heavy silence. Lena's legs finally gave out. She swayed, and Cale's hand shot out to steady her, his fingers gripping her arm. She had done it. She had turned her back on her own people. She had publicly sided with a savage against the United States Army. She was no longer just a victim. She was a traitor. Cale looked down at her, his expression unreadable. He had seen her tremble, and he had seen her stand. He had seen her gamble her life, her reputation, and her entire future on his word. He did not know why she had done it, but he knew, in that moment, that his life and hers were now bound together, whether they liked it or not. Miles away. Silas Kane would soon get the news. The witness was not a victim. She was an ally of his enemy. His simple plan of using her as a pawn was shattered. Now, there was only one solution: all-out violence. He would have to burn the valley. And the woman with it. Life in the valley fell into a rhythm that was entirely new to Lena. The first few days after the cavalry patrol left were a blur of shame and defiance. She had chosen, she had picked a side, and now she was trapped by that choice. The Navajo women, who had been suspicious but distant, now looked at her with an even more complex curiosity. She was the Bilagana woman who had turned her back on the bluecoats. This did not make her one of them. It just made her strange. A young woman, not much older than Lena, was the first to break the silence. She had sharp, intelligent eyes and a smile that was quick and bright. She approached Lena while Lena was awkwardly trying to wash her ruined dress in the creek. "You use too much soap," the young woman said in clear, slightly accented English. "If you use that much, you will taste it in the water downstream." Lena stopped, her hands dripping. "You speak English?" "Of course," the woman said, laughing. "I went to the fort school for 2 years, until they told us our prayers were wrong." She knelt beside Lena. "My name is Tala. You are Cale's cousin, but you are not. It is confusing. I am not his anything," Lena said, flushing. "I am his prisoner." "A prisoner?" Tala's eyebrows shot up. "Cale does not take prisoners. He takes burdens. Sometimes. You look like a burden." She said it with a mischievous glint that was impossible to hate. "I am his real cousin. You must be his white woman burden." Despite herself, Lena felt a small smile tug at her lips. "My name is Lena." "Lena," Tala repeated. "It is a soft name. Here, let me show you." She took the dress and began to work it against a smooth rock, using a root that foamed slightly in the water. "You are a terrible washer. A good thing you are a teacher." Or so Cale said. Tala became her bridge. She was a constant, chattering presence, translating not just the words but the customs. Through her, Lena began to learn the small, essential tasks of survival. She learned to grind corn on a metate, a soul-crushing, back-breaking job that left her muscles screaming, but filled the camp's stores. She learned to weave, her clumsy fingers fumbling with the bright threads as the older women watched with patient, silent amusement. She learned that these people were not a monolith. Old Bear, Cale's grandfather, was the one who truly led the village. He was a quiet man, deeply spiritual, but his eyes held a keen understanding of the white world. One evening, he sat with her by the fire, with Cale translating. "You are not the first of your people to be in this valley," Old Bear said. "Many years ago, a soldier, a bluecoat, was lost in a blizzard. His horse died. We found him half dead." "What did you do?" Lena asked. "We brought him here. We fed him. My wife, who is gone now, mended his skin. He stayed for 1 moon until the snow cleared. He learned some of our words. He was a good man. His name was Cole." "What happened to him?" "We showed him the way to the fort. He said he would always remember us. He said he would speak of our kindness." Old Bear looked into the fire. "The next year, the army broke the treaty at Canyon de Chelly. Words from a good man are just wind against a hurricane, but we still remember him. It is possible for a man to be good, even if his people are not." Lena thought of the name, Cole. It meant nothing to her, but the story settled in her heart. Her relationship with Cale was the most difficult. It was not a friendship. It was a tense, daily negotiation. He was responsible for her, and he felt the weight of it. She was dependent on him, and she hated it. "You ride like a sack of potatoes," he told her one morning, his voice sharp. He had found her trying to saddle one of the Navajo ponies. "I ride perfectly well." "Thank you," she retorted. "I had lessons at a perfectly fine academy in Philadelphia, on a horse with a blanket and a chair," he said, pulling the saddle away. "You cannot run in a chair. You will learn to ride our way. Without a saddle, you will feel the horse. You will feel when he is tired, when he is afraid. You will feel the ground." He forced her onto the bare back of a quiet mare. It was terrifying. She slid off twice, landing in the dust to the giggling delight of the watching children. Her legs and back ached, but he taught her. He was a harsh teacher, but patient in his own way. He showed her how to grip with her knees, how to move with the horse, not against it. In return, she began to teach the children. She had no slate, no books, so she used a stick to draw letters in the dirt. The children, who were bright and quick, flocked to her. She taught them hello and goodbye, and my name is... It was during one of these lessons that Cale found her, sitting on the ground, surrounded by a dozen laughing, shouting children, her face smeared with red dirt, her hair down from its bun. He stopped, just watching. He saw not the frightened Bilagana from the coach, but a woman. Tala slid up beside him. "Be careful, cousin," she whispered in Navajo, a grin on her face. "Your white woman burden is stealing your children. She has a strong heart. For a person with such pale eyes..." Cale grunted and walked away. The arguments did not stop. They were just different. "You cannot just take a horse," Lena insisted one day, after seeing a warrior return with a branded army mule. "The army stole our land. We take their mule." "It is a fair trade," Cale replied, sharpening an arrow. "That is not how law works. That is theft. It is the law of the land." He shot back, his eyes flashing. "They take our earth. We take their tools." "Your paper law is for men who live in square houses and think the world is flat. This world is round. What you take, you must one day give back." The fragile peace of the valley was shattered by the sky itself. The day began with a strange, yellow light. The air was still, heavy and hot. By afternoon, the sky had turned a dark, bruised purple. A wind began to moan through the canyon. Old Bear gave a sharp command. A sandstorm. The women grabbed the children, herding them toward the Hogans. Lena, caught in the open, tried to help, grabbing the hands of two small children. The storm hit like a physical wall. A screaming, blinding force of sand and wind. Lena was knocked off her feet. She held on to the children, pulling them close, her back to the stinging sand. She could not see, could not hear, could not breathe. And then came the rain. Not a gentle rain, but a deluge. The sky opened. The storm, which had been dry, turned to a torrent. Lena realized, with a new, cold terror, that they were in the middle of a dry riverbed. A roar filled the air, louder than the wind. It was the sound of 1,000 tons of water. A flash flood. Lena Cale's voice cut through the storm. He was on horseback, his face a mask of desperation. A wall of brown, churning water, full of debris, rounded the bend. "Run!" Lena screamed at the children, shoving them toward the bank. The ground beneath them was already mud, sucking at their feet. She pushed the first child up the rocky incline. The second one slipped. Lena grabbed for him, and her own feet went out from under her. The water, ankle-deep a second ago, was now at her waist, a roaring, pulling monster. She lost her grip on the bank. She was swept away, tumbling in the cold, muddy water. She saw the sky, then the water, then the sky. She felt her dress snag on a submerged branch. It held her for a second, then ripped, tearing her chemise underneath. She slammed into a rock. The air knocked from her lungs. "This is it," she thought, a strange, cold calm settling over her. "I survived a man's lies only to be killed by the earth." Then a hand was in her hair, an arm like a steel cable wrapped around her chest. Cale. He had plunged his horse into the flood. He was holding her with one arm, his other hand twisted in the horse's mane, fighting the current. "Hold on," he roared. The horse screamed, its feet finding purchase on the slick rock bottom. It lunged, straining, and pulled them from the main current into the shallows by the bank. Cale slid from the horse, pulling her with him. They collapsed on the muddy bank, soaked, gasping, and alive. The two children were safe, huddled with Tala, who had run to help. Lena was shivering, her body shaking from cold and shock. Her dress was ripped, the bodice torn open, her white chemise showing through. Cale was still holding her, his chest heaving against her back. It was the closest they had ever been. She could feel the heat of him, the hard muscle, the steady beat of his heart. He had not saved her because it was his duty. He had saved her because he had seen her go under. He gently, almost awkwardly, pulled his blanket from his horse and wrapped it around her, his hands brushing her wet hair from her face. Their eyes met. The animosity was gone. The suspicion was gone. All that was left was the raw, breathless fact that they were both alive. He had saved her. She had trusted him. And in that moment, something shifted. A bond was forged. Not of words, but of water and terror and survival. That night, the stars were brilliant in the washed-clean sky. Lena sat alone, wrapped in a dry Navajo blanket. She looked up at the vast, uncaring spray of stars. Her mind was a battleground. If she went back to Red Rock, what would she be? The lieutenant had called her an accomplice. The story by now would be all over town. She would be Canal Nez's woman, the whore who slept with the savages. No school would hire her. No decent person would speak to her. But if she stayed here, what was she? She could grind corn and wash clothes, but she would never be Navajo. She would always be the white woman, the outsider, a burden Cale had been forced to carry. She was caught between two worlds, belonging to neither. A week later, a traitor, a half-Paiute man who Cale trusted, made his way to the valley. He brought news, and it was bad. Silas Kane is not a quiet man, the traitor said, sharing coffee with Old Bear and Cale. Lena and Tala listened from the shadows. He is telling everyone in Red Rock that there is a massive silver strike in this very valley. He is bringing in men from all over the territory, not just miners, hired guns. He is camped outside Red Rock, building a private army. He is a liar, Cale said. There is no silver here. Of course not, the traitor said. But it is a good story. He is building a citizen's posse to rescue the white woman. He nodded toward Lena, and to protect the miners' claims from you. He has 100 men. He plans to attack. The camp was plunged into a new, cold fear. We cannot fight 100 men, Old Bear said, his voice heavy. We will not win with arrows. Cale agreed. We must win with words. With the truth. He looked at Lena. The plan was formed. Born of desperation. They could not wait for the attack. They had to go to Red Rock. Not to the army, not to the judge in Kane's pocket, but to the town itself. There is a sheriff, Cale said. Sheriff Watson. He is an old man. He is not owned by Kane. Not yet. He believes in the law. Your paper law. He said to Lena. We will go to him, Lena said, her voice quiet. Cale and I, we will take the traitor's report, and I will give my testimony, publicly. If we can turn the town against Kane, his army of citizens will melt away. It was a terrible risk. If Silas caught them, they would be dead before they ever saw the sheriff. They would be walking into the lion's den. The night before they left, the village was quiet. Children came to Lena, touching her hand, pressing small gifts into her palm, a smooth river stone, a bright bluebird feather. Tala pulled her aside. This is a bad idea, Tala said. Her usual humor gone. It is the only idea we have, Lena replied. Tala pressed a small, beaded amulet into her hand. It was in the shape of a dragonfly. This is for you, so you can see the truth in the lies. Then she grinned, her mischief returning for a second. And so that fool man Cale finally sees the heart inside of you, instead of just the white skin on the outside. Lena clutched the amulet. At dawn, they left. There were no grand farewells. Cale brought his best horse, a strong pinto. He mounted, then reached down a hand for Lena. She took it. He pulled her up, seating her behind him, her arms forced to circle his waist to keep her balance. The physical contact was unavoidable, intimate, and deeply unsettling. His back was warm and solid against her. They rode out of the hidden valley, a renegade warrior and a disgraced schoolteacher, heading for the one place that wanted them both dead. They were going to save a people by using the white man's law against him. And Lena was terrified that all they were doing was choosing the manner of their own execution. They rode under the cover of darkness, moving through the washes and canyons that Cale knew as well as the lines on his own hand. The ride was long, and the enforced intimacy of their position on the horse was a silent, vibrating wire of tension. Lena's arms were around his waist, her face often pressed against his back as they ducked low-hanging branches. She could feel the hard, lean muscle, the warmth of him through his shirt. It was a proximity that, just weeks ago, would have been a source of terror. Now, it was just a fact. A strange, unsettling fact. Red Rock appeared at dawn, a ragged collection of wooden storefronts and canvas tents huddled in the red dust. It was not a town. It was a wound. It stank of stale whiskey, unwashed men, and greed, even from a distance. The noise was a dull roar, the ring of a blacksmith's hammer, the tinny piano from a saloon that never closed, and the rumble of heavy wagons. Cale reined in the Pinto, hiding them in a shallow arroyo a half-mile from the main street. "We separate here," he said, his voice a low rumble. He slid off the horse and reached up to help her down. She was stiff and sore, her legs shaking. As her feet touched the ground, she looked at him. This was it. "What if they see you, they will not see me," he said. It was not a boast. It was a statement of fact. "I will be in the shadows. The Bilagana are blind in their own light." He pointed to a 2-story wooden building at the end of the street. "The sheriff's office is there, the one with the wooden star. Go to him, Sheriff Watson. Tell your story. I will be watching. If there is trouble, I know," she said. He looked at her, his black eyes searching her face. He saw the grime, the exhaustion, and the fear, but also the hard line of her jaw. He nodded. "Once. Be the teacher. Lena Hart. Be the woman who faced the lieutenant. Do not be the victim." Then he was gone. He did not run. He simply turned and blended into the rocks in the deep morning shadows, vanishing as if he were never there. Lena took a deep breath, straightened her torn and filthy skirt as best she could, and began to walk. The main street of Red Rock hit her like a physical assault. Men, bearded and armed, stopped to stare. Their eyes raked over her, noting her ripped dress, her wild hair, and her dust-caked skin. "Well, looky here," a miner with a face like a dried apple leered. "That must be her, the one the Injun stole? Don't look stolen to me." His companion laughed, spitting a stream of tobacco juice that landed inches from her feet. "Looks more like she's been broke in." Another man, drunk at 6 in the morning, grabbed her arm. "What'd he do to ye? Honey, you tell us. We'll get that red skin for ye." Lena ripped her arm away, her eyes flashing. "Do not touch me," she spat, her voice cold with a fury that surprised them. They fell back, momentarily cowed. She kept walking, her head high. She passed the blacksmith, the saloon, the general store, and then she saw it. Nailed to a post outside the sheriff's office, a wanted poster. It was a crude drawing, but unmistakable. Cale Nez, renegade. Wanted for murder and kidnapping. $100. She felt sick. She pushed open the door to the sheriff's office. It was empty. A pot-bellied stove was cold in the corner. She turned to leave, and a man's voice, smooth as oiled leather, stopped her. "Miss Hart, is that you?" He was standing on the boardwalk as if he had been waiting. He was handsome, in the way a wolf is handsome. He was in his 40s, dressed in a tailored Eastern suit of dark wool, a silk vest, and a gleaming gold watch chain. He smelled of expensive cigars and cologne. He was Silas Kane. "Thank God," he said, removing his hat. His hair was silver at the temples, his eyes a piercing friendly blue. "We have been sick with worry, the whole town. We heard you had been taken." His voice was all concern, all civilization, and it made Lena's skin crawl. It was Robert's voice, the voice of a man who smiled while he lied. "I was not taken, Mr. Kane," Lena said, her voice steady. "I was rescued." Kane's smile did not falter, but his eyes hardened for a fraction of a second. "Of course. My dear, the trauma, it can confuse a person. You are safe now. That is all that matters." He gestured. "You must be exhausted. I have a room for you at the hotel. The best one. You can get cleaned up, get some rest, and then we will all hear your story." "I need to see Sheriff Watson," Lena insisted. "And you will. You will," Kane soothed, taking her arm in a light, proprietary grip. "He is out with my posse, searching for you. He will be overjoyed to find you safe. Come, let me see to your comfort. He was steering her, gently but firmly, away from the sheriff's office and toward the Red Rock Hotel. The men on the street, who had been leering moments before, now tipped their hats. They were not respecting her. They were respecting him. He led her into the hotel lobby. It was surprisingly plush, with a red carpet and a mahogany desk. He spoke to the clerk, who handed him a key. Your bag, of course, was lost, Kane said, leading her up the stairs. I will have my man arrange for some suitable things to be sent over. A new dress, whatever you need. He unlocked a door at the end of the hall and swept his arm inside. Your sanctuary, Miss Hart. The room was large, with a soft bed and a porcelain wash basin. But the first thing Lena saw was the window. It overlooked a dirty back alley. Rest, my dear, Kane said, his smile never wavering. I will have a guard posted outside your door to make sure no one disturbs you. We will speak when you are refreshed. He closed the door. She heard the sound of a heavy footstep outside, pacing. Then, a quiet click. She ran to the door and tried the handle. It was locked. From the outside, she spun around, her heart hammering. The room, the sanctuary. She ran to the window. She tried to lift the sash. It was nailed shut. She was not his guest. She was his prisoner. He was not protecting her. He was silencing her. He was not Robert. He was worse. Robert had only wanted her money. Kane wanted her voice. He wanted to own her story. She looked around the room, frantic. There was no escape. She was trapped. She sat on the bed, her mind racing. She had to think. What would Cale do? He would not panic. He would look. He would find a way. She went back to the window. Nailed shut. She looked at the nails. They were new. She looked at the wash basin, the heavy porcelain pitcher. She picked it up. They had to hide. The escape from the hotel had been a nightmare of splintering wood, a terrified clerk, and a desperate race through the alleys. Lena had smashed the window, cut her arm on the glass, and scrambled onto the low roof of the kitchen, ignoring the shouts of the guard. Cale had been there, in the alley, as he said he would. He had seen the locked door, seen the guard. He had been waiting. He pulled her from the roof, and they ran. Cale pulling her by the hand, twisting through a maze of backlots and stables until the shouts of Red Rock faded behind them. They were now miles from town, hidden in a small, box canyon Cale knew. A thin stream trickled over the rocks, pooling in a clear, deep basin. The moon was high, bathing the canyon in silver light. Lena was shaking, a delayed reaction to the adrenaline and the terror. Her arm was bleeding, her dress was ruined, and she was covered in filth from the alley. Cale said nothing. He took her bleeding arm, examined the cut. It was long, but not deep. He tore a strip from his own shirt, a gesture that shocked her, and gently, skillfully, bound the wound. You are bleeding, she whispered, looking at the blood on his skin. It is your blood, he said. He went to the stream, wet the rest of the cloth, and came back. He began to wipe the grime and blood from her arm, his touch surprisingly gentle. When he was done, he built a small fire in a smokeless pit, using dry wood that would not betray their location. Lena huddled by it, her teeth chattering, though not just from cold. I have to wash, she said, her voice small. She looked at her hands, her dress. I cannot. I am covered in it. Cale nodded. He understood. He looked at the pool of water, then back at her. He turned and walked to the mouth of the canyon, his back to her. The water is deep there. I will keep watch. Lena looked at his broad back, silhouetted against the moonlight. He was giving her privacy. He was trusting her not to run, and he was respecting her modesty. She went to the pool. Her fingers fumbled with the buttons of her torn dress. It was a ruin. She let it fall to the ground. Her chemistry and petticoats were just as bad. With shaking hands, she undressed, her skin, pale and vulnerable, revealed to the cold night air. She had never been naked outside in her life. She was a virgin, and the thought of her own body, exposed, terrified her. She slid into the water. It was icy cold, shocking her, but it was clean. She ducked under, washing the filth of red rock from her skin and hair. She stood up in the chest-deep water, the moonlight silvering her wet shoulders and the curve of her neck. She looked over at Cale. He had not moved. He was just a dark, solid shape, watching the trail. And yet she felt seen. She felt his awareness of her. She wrapped her arms around herself, her face burning with a heat the cold water could not touch. "Don't look," she whispered, the words barely audible, carried on the breeze. He did not turn. His head tilted, as if he had heard her. A small, almost invisible smile touched his mouth. "I will look forever," he said, his voice a low, soft rumble. Not a promise to look now, but an admission. Inside my memory, Lena's breath caught in her throat. It was the most intimate thing anyone had ever said to her. He was not leering. He was not sunning her, as the men in Red Rock had. He was seeing her, the woman, not the object. And he was choosing to give her the dignity she had asked for. The raw, aching loneliness she had carried for months. The feeling of being a piece of property, of being a lie, cracked. She washed quickly, her heart pounding a new, strange rhythm. She climbed out, her body shivering, and scrambled back into her wet, torn chemise. It was all she had. She ran to the fire, her teeth chattering violently. She was huddled there, trying to dry her hair. When he returned, he sat across the small fire from her, his eyes dark. He had a dry blanket from his horse's saddle roll. He did not throw it to her. He stood up, walked around the fire, and draped it over her shoulders, his fingers brushing her wet hair. She clutched it, pulling it tight. "Thank you." They sat in silence for a long time, the fire crackling between them. "My older brother," Cale said, his voice soft, "loved a Bilagana woman. She was the daughter of a trader. They met in secret. He believed her people's words. He believed in her God." Lena looked up, captured by his tone. "When her father found out, he had his men whip my brother. They left him for dead. When our people found him, they called him a fool. They said he had betrayed his blood for a white woman. He was an outcast from both. He took his own life. He walked into the desert and did not come back." Lena's hand went to her mouth. "Cale, I am so sorry. It is a bad thing," he said, staring into the flames. "To be caught between two worlds. Both sides hate you." Lena thought of the men on the street, calling her a whore. She thought of the lieutenant, calling her an accomplice. "Yes," she whispered. "It is." She looked at him, at his strong, stoic profile, and she felt a sudden urge to be as honest as he had been. "The man I was supposed to marry, back east, his name was Robert. He told me he loved me. He said I was his life." She laughed, a short, bitter sound. "But his life, it turned out, was worth $20,000. That was the dowry of the woman he married instead of me. He sold me. He sold his love for money. I thought all men were like him. That love was just a word they used to hide their greed." And now he asked, his eyes meeting hers across the fire. "Now," she said, her voice trembling, "I think I am just afraid. I am afraid of all of it, of you, of what I am feeling. It is wrong. You are Navajo. I am white. Both sides hate us." "Yes," he said, his voice holding no judgment, only a deep, shared sadness. "They do." He did not move to touch her. He did not offer her any easy lies. He just sat with her, in the shared, lonely space between their two worlds. A sound on the ridge made Cale go still. He was on his feet in an instant, his hand on his knife, pulling Lena into the shadows. A man on foot, in a blue uniform, was moving cautiously down the trail. "Stay here," Cale whispered. He moved, a shadow among shadows. He was behind the man in seconds, his knife at the man's throat. "Do not move." "Wait," the man gasped, his voice tight with fear. "Wait." "I am a friend. I know Old Bear. My name is Sergeant Cole. He saved my life." Years ago, Cale froze. He released the pressure, but did not move the knife. "I am Sergeant Cole." The man rushed on, his hands raised. "I was with Lieutenant Brody. I heard what that woman said. I believed her. I have been looking for you." Cale stepped back, pulling the man toward the fire. Lena, clutching the blanket, stepped into the light. Sergeant Cole's eyes went wide. "Ma'am, thank God. You have to listen. I am risking everything, but I have to tell you, Kane is not just building a posse. He has paid off the territorial judge. He is planning a trial." "A trial," Lena said, confused. "For who? For him," Cole said, nodding at Cale. "It is a sham. A show. He has a dozen witnesses paid to lie, to say they saw Cale lead the massacre. He is going to arrest you, Cale, and he is going to hang you in the town square. Tomorrow." Cole looked at Lena, his face grim. "And you, ma'am, he is going to use you. He is going to put you on the stand as the star witness, the victim. He is going to say you are too terrified to speak, but that your brave rescue is all the proof they need. He is going to use your silence to justify hanging Cale in his own private war on the Navajo." Lena and Cale looked at each other. The firelight danced in their eyes. The law. The paper law Cale had mocked. It was not a shield. It was a trap. Going back to Red Rock. Going to the sheriff. It was all useless. It was a prearranged execution. They were well and truly, completely, on their own. The crackle of the fire was the only sound in the canyon. Lena stared at Sergeant Cole, her mind struggling to accept his words. A sham trial. A public hanging. A trap set not with guns, but with the laws. "We cannot go back," she said, her voice a dry whisper. The blanket felt impossible, but she was cold, a chill that came from deep inside. "If you go back, you die," Cole said, his face haggard in the firelight. He looked at Cale, "And he dies, and Kane gets what he wants. Then we do not go back," Cale stated. He looked at Cole. "Why do you do this? You wear their blue coat. Old Bear's kindness was many years ago. Some debts you do not forget," Cole said grimly. "And some orders, they stick in your throat. I did not sign up to be Silas Kane's private bully. I have evidence, dispatches, Kane's own letters to the fort, demanding patrols, fabricating reports of raids. The real reason Lieutenant Brody was out there, it proves what Miss Hart said. It proves the whole thing is a land grab." He reached inside his tunic and pulled out a thick, oilskin pouch. "I cannot carry this. If I am caught, I will be shot for treason. But Sheriff Watson, he is a good man. As you said, he is just old and scared. But he believes in the badge." He held the pouch out, not to Cale, to Lena. "If you are caught, they will not shoot you on sight," Cole said. "They will not dare harm you in public. Not yet. You are still the victim. Give this to Watson, and only to Watson. It is the only chance you have, the only chance any of you have." "We will not go," Cale said, his voice flat. "It is a white man's trap. And if you run," Lena asked, looking at Cale, her voice finding a new, desperate strength. "What happens then? Cale Kane will not get his trial, so he will bring his army. He will come to the valley. He will burn it, just like he burned your uncle's camp. He will kill Old Bear, and Tala, and the children. Your way is to run. My way is to fight. This," she said, touching the oilskin pouch, "is the only weapon we have that is not a bow or a knife." Cale stared at her, his face a mask of stone. She was right. She was telling him a truth he did not want to hear. To run was to condemn his people. To stay was to walk into his own hanging. "What do you propose?" he asked her, his voice rough. "Sergeant Cole gives this to Sheriff Watson. He puts it in his office. We find a way to get to Watson. We have to—" "No," Cole said, shaking his head. "It is too dangerous for me to go back now. They will know I am gone. They will be hunting me, too." He looked at Cale. "There is one man in town, a livery hand. His name is Peters. He owes me a favor. He is not brave, but he is not Kane's. He will hide you. He can get a message to Watson. It is the only way." Cale's jaw tightened. He was a warrior. He was a man who knew the earth and the wind. He was being asked to trust a Billigana soldier's word, to hide in a white man's smelly barn, and to trust a Billigana lawman. It was all forms of poison. But he looked at Lena, at her pale, determined face, her eyes shining with a terrible fire. She was willing to die for this. For his people. "We go," he said. The livery stable stank of hay, manure, and betrayal. They reached it before dawn, moving like ghosts through the alleys of Red Rock. Sergeant Cole had given them the directions, the one by the creek. "Go in the back. Say you are here for the sergeant's horse." Cale moved first, a shadow in the darkness. He slipped the wooden bar on the back door. It was unlocked, as Cole had promised. They stepped inside. The stable was dark, quiet, full of the soft sounds of horses shifting in their stalls. "Peters," Lena whispered. "Right here." A man stepped out from a stall, holding a lantern. He was small, weasel-faced, and visibly shaking. Sergeant Cole said, and then the stable doors at the front of the barn slammed open, flooding the space with the light of a dozen torches. Men filled the doorway. They were not soldiers. They were Kane's men, the posse, led by the scarred man from the stagecoach attack. Peters, the livery hand, gave a small, terrified squeak. "I am sorry," he whimpered, backing away. He said he would not hurt me. "It was a trap," Cale said, his voice not surprised, just full of a cold, final anger. He shoved Lena behind him. Cole did not know. The weasel was always Kane's. Nowhere to run. "Renegade," the scarred man snarled, leveling a shotgun. "And look, you brought the little whore back. Saves us the trouble of hunting her." Cale pulled his knife. It was a hopeless gesture. 10 guns were on him. "Go ahead," the scared man mocked. "Give me the reason." "No," Lena screamed, stepping out from behind Cale. "Stop, you cannot. I am a witness. You are a suspect." "Ma'am," a new voice said. Silas Kane himself stepped into the light, dressed immaculately, as if for a morning stroll. "A suspect, Miss Hart, is conspiring with a known murderer. But do not worry. We will sort all this out. Legally." He nodded to his men. "Take him. Do not mark his face. The judge will want to see him clearly when he hangs. And take Miss Hart to the townhouse. She is a material witness. She is to be protected. No one sees her. No one." Cale did not fight. He simply dropped his knife. He would not be shot in the back in a stable. He would not give them the satisfaction. As they bound his hands, his eyes met Lena's. There was no apology, no fear, just a shared, terrible understanding. She had been right. They had to fight with the white man's law. And they had just lost. Lena was not taken to jail. She was taken to a room in the townhouse, the building that served as Red Rock's council chamber and meeting hall. It was the luxury prison Sergeant Cole had warned of. The door was solid oak, the key turned in the lock, and a man stood outside. She spent the day in a daze of fear and rage. She had been a fool. Cale had been right. You could not fight a hurricane with a piece of paper. Late in the afternoon, a new man came to her door. He was old, with a drooping mustache and a weary, watery-eyed face. He wore a tarnished silver star on his vest. "Sheriff Watson," he looked at the guard. "Mr. Kane said I could speak with the witness to get her official statement." The guard grunted and stepped aside. The sheriff entered, closing the door. "Are you all right?" "Miss Hart," he asked, his voice a low rumble. "Am I all right?" Lena leaped from the cot. "I am a prisoner. They are going to hang an innocent man. You are the sheriff. You have to stop this." Sheriff Watson sighed, a long, tired sound. He looked at the floor. "Miss Hart, I am an old man. I have a wife in this town. I have a pension coming in 2 years. I am one man. You are the law," she hissed. "The law," he said, looking up, his eyes full of a sad, quiet shame, "is a very convenient thing. Miss, and right now, the law is whatever Silas Kane says it is. He has a territorial judge in his pocket. He has 100 armed men. I have 1 pistol and a bad hip. Now, I am here to give you some advice. You are a young woman. You are alive. When they call you to that trial, you keep your mouth shut. You cry. You say you do not remember. You let them save you. You go back east, and you live. Do not be a fool." Lena stared at him, her heart turning to ice. This was the law. This was the good man Cale had told her to trust. "A coward. Get out," she whispered. "Miss, get out!" she screamed. The sheriff winced, cast one last sad look at her, and left. She was alone. Utterly. The trial was held the next morning. It was not a trial, it was a public spectacle. The meeting hall was packed. Every miner, saloon girl, and merchant in Red Rock was there, crammed onto the benches, standing in the aisles. The air was hot and smelled of sweat and whiskey. They brought Cale in, his hands bound. He stood on a small wooden platform, flanked by 4 of Kane's guards. He wore no paint. He was just a man, in a buckskin shirt, his black hair unbound, his face stoic. He looked once at the crowd, his eyes scanning for her. A new judge, a man Lena had never seen, sat at the bench. He had a hard, mean face and eyes that were already drunk at 10 in the morning. "This court is in session," he barked. "We are here to try the Navajo renegade Cale Nez for the murder of Jebediah Stone, the driver of the Butterfield stage, and the kidnapping of Miss Lena Hart." "How does the prisoner plead?" Cale said nothing. He just stared at the judge. "Silence is a plea of guilt," the judge roared, banging his gavel. "Let us proceed." Silas Kane was the first to testify. He was not sworn in. He stood before the crowd, his voice smooth and reasonable, painting a picture of sorrow. "Gentlemen, ladies, we are a town of progress. We are carving a life from this hard land, but we are beset by savagery." He pointed at Cale. "This man, this renegade, led a band of killers. They ambushed our stage. They murdered a good man. And they stole, they defiled our most precious flower, an innocent woman, our new school teacher." A growl went up from the crowd. "By God's grace," Kane continued, "and the bravery of our own citizens' posse, we rescued her. We found her, praising the Lord, unharmed, but terrified. Too terrified, gentlemen, to even speak of what was done to her." The crowd roared. "Hang him, hang the bastard. She is safe now," Kane said, holding up a hand. "Under my personal protection, she is in no condition to be here, to relive her trauma. But we, as men, must act for her. We must show these heathens that the law has come to Red Rock. We must show them what we do. 2 animals. Hang him." The cry came again. Lena heard it all. She was not in the hall. She was in her room, listening through the closed door. Every shout, every lie, was a nail in Cale's coffin. She looked at her hands. She thought of Sheriff Watson's advice. Keep your mouth shut. Live. She thought of Robert, in his fine waistcoat, his voice just as smooth as Kane's. It is just business. Lena, a practical matter. She thought of Cale, his face by the fire. It is a bad thing to be caught between 2 worlds. She thought of him by the stream, his quiet, respectful answer, "I will look forever," inside my memory. If she stayed silent, she would be safe. She could go home, but she would be just like them. She would be a liar. She would be a murderer. She would be betraying the only man who had ever told her a hard, honorable truth. She would not. The judge was speaking. "This court finds the prisoner, Cale Nez." The door to the hall burst open. Lena Hart stood in the doorway. Her dress was still torn, her arm bandaged. Her hair was wild. She looked like a prophetess of fury. The hall went dead silent. You are not supposed to be here," the judge stammered, his face turning purple. "Guards, get her no." Lena's voice was not loud, but it cut through the silence like a knife. "You will listen." She walked down the aisle, the crowd parting before her as if she were a ghost. She did not look at Cale. She looked at the judge. She looked at Silas Kane. "My name is Lena Hart," she said, her voice clear and strong, ringing through the room. "I was on that stagecoach. I am the only passenger who saw it all. And you, sir," she pointed at Silas Kane, "are a liar." A collective gasp sucked the air from the room. Kane's face went white. "That man," she pointed to Cale, "did not kidnap me. He saved my life." "She is hysterical," Kane shouted, finding his voice. "The savage has bewitched her, brainwashed her." "He did not attack the stage," Lena shouted over him, her voice rising. "The stage was attacked by white men. Men in blue coats, men who shouted your name. Silas Kane, they said they were there for you. And their leader, The scarred man standing right there, she pointed at the guard by the door, who froze in shock, shouted for them to kill me because I had seen his face. The crowd erupted. Not in anger, but in 1,000 confused, excited murmurs. Men were looking at each other. They were looking at the scarred man. They were looking at Cain. I saw them, Lena continued. Tears of pure rage streaming down her face. I saw them burn a Navajo camp. I saw your survey stakes. Mr. Cain, you want to hang him for murder. You should be hanging for it yourself. You want a trial? Then let us have a real one. I am the witness, and I am telling you, this is not justice. This is a lynching. This is theft. This is murder. Silas Cain had lost control. The crowd was no longer a mob. It was a room full of questioning, suspicious men. He had built his power on lies, and she had just set fire to the whole facade. He dropped the pretense. His civilized mask melted, revealing the wolf beneath. "She is a traitor," he roared, his face mottled with fury. "Liar, she is in league with the renegade. She is as guilty as he is. Guards seize her, seize them both for conspiring against the town of Red Rock." The guards, Cain's private army, drew their pistols. They turned them on the crowd. They turned them on Lena. One man grabbed Cale, shoving a pistol to his head. The trial was over. The violence was just beginning. In the back of the room, Sheriff Watson, who had been watching from a corner, his face pale, saw his moment. Sergeant Cole, who had slipped in disguised as a miner, caught his eye. Cole tossed the oilskin pouch. It slid, unnoticed in the chaos. Under a bench, Cole vanished. The sheriff, his hands shaking, shuffled forward. Now, Mr. Cain," he said, his voice a weak reed in the storm. "Let us not be hasty. We must have order. Drag him back to the jail," Cain commanded, ignoring the sheriff, his eyes fixed on Lena. "He will hang tonight, at sunset. And lock her in jail, not the townhouse, the jail, with the rest of the animals." Cale was dragged out, his head high. He looked back at Lena. Just once. It was a look of stunned, profound respect. Lena stood tall as the guards grabbed her arms. She had lost. She had failed to save him. But she had spoken the truth. She was no longer a victim. She was no longer a coward. And as they dragged her toward the dark, filthy jail, she made a silent, burning vow. If this system would not give her justice, she would find another way. The system was broken, so she would break it, too. The jail was a brick oven, hot, airless, and stinking of fear. Lena sat on the filthy floor of her cell, the metal bars cool against her back. In the adjoining cell, she could see Cale. He was not sitting. He was standing, his body utterly still, his eyes closed, as if listening to a sound only he could hear. He was preparing himself for death. The afternoon dragged on. Sunset. Cain had said, a public hanging. A scratching sound came from the one, high, barred window. It was so small a child could barely fit. A scratching. Then a small pebble tapped the glass. Lena stood. Cale's eyes snapped open. A face appeared in the window, framed against the bright blue sky. It was Tala. She was clinging to the brickwork, her face pressed to the bars. She held up a finger to her lips, then held up a small, dark bottle. Lena's heart leaped. Tala pointed to the front of the jail, then made a drinking motion, then a sleeping one. She grinned, a flash of white teeth, and was gone. An hour later, as the sun began to slant low, painting the street outside a bloody orange, the guard, a different man from the scarred one. This one, heavy and lazy, unlocked the main jailhouse door. He was carrying a plate of greasy beans for Lena. "Mr. Cain said the turncoat eats," he grunted, shoving the plate through the bars. Lena, her mind racing, put her plan into motion. She changed her entire demeanor. She became the woman the guard expected. She began to cry. Soft, hysterical sobs. "Oh, God," she wept. "I was so wrong. I was so foolish. He bewitched me, just like Mr. Cain said." The guard, surprised, stopped. "Well, 'bout time you saw sense. Girlie, please," she begged, coming to the bars, her eyes wide and tear-filled. I cannot bear to be in here. I'm so afraid. Please, I have money, left from my trip, in my boot, a $5 piece. It is all I have. But you look like a kind man, not like the others. Would you buy me a bottle of whiskey just to numb the terror? I cannot stand it. The guard's eyes narrowed, then lit with greed. A $5 piece for a bottle that cost 2 bits. And for you, Lena added, dropping her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. For your troubles. You have been standing there all day. It must be terrible. Please, we could share it just for a moment, just for human kindness. He stared at her, at this pretty, crying white woman. He was just a thug. He was not paid to think, he was paid to guard, and his shift was almost over. Wait here, he said. He was back in 5 minutes. He unlocked her cell door. Just for a minute, he grumbled, eyeing the door. Thank you. Oh, thank you, Lena sobbed. He opened the bottle of whiskey he had brought and took a long drink. He passed it to her. Her hands were shaking. She pretended to drink, wincing at the smell. It is so strong, she gasped. But I saw a girl in the saloon. She had some laudanum for a toothache. She gave me a little bottle. She said it helps. Before the guard could react, she pulled the small dark bottle from her bodice. Tala's bottle. Maybe this will help, she whispered, her eyes meeting his. She poured a heavy, dark stream into the whiskey bottle. She swirled it. For our troubles, she said, her voice husky. She handed the bottle to him. He looked at her, at the open invitation in her eyes. He was a simple, greedy man. He grinned, put the bottle to his lips, and drank, deeply. That's the stuff, he said, his voice already blurring. He drank again. Now, about that $5 piece. His eyes rolled back in his head. He collapsed, a dead weight, onto her cot. Lena did not waste a second. She grabbed the ring of keys from his belt. She ran to Cale's cell. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely fit the key. Hurry, Cale said, his voice low and urgent. The lock clicked. The door swung open. He was free. He grabbed the guard's pistol from its holster, checked its load, and tucked it into his waistband. The back window. Tala's voice came from outside. Cale smashed the glass with the butt of the pistol, cleared the shards, and vaulted through. He landed in the alley, then turned, his arms up. He caught Lena as she scrambled through, lifting her down as if she weighed nothing. Tala was there, with Sergeant Cole and 2 horses. You were slow, Tala grinned. We go, Cale said, his face a hard mask. He swung Lena onto one horse, mounting behind her, his arms locking around her. We ride north, to the mountains. We disappear. They were galloping out of the alley when Lena grabbed the reins. No, she shouted, pulling the horse to a stop. Lena, he has an army. They will be on us in minutes. This is not a fight. It is a slaughter, Cale argued, his voice desperate. And what about your people? She cried, twisting to face him. Her eyes were blazing. What about Old Bear and the children? If we run, Kane wins. He will not chase us. Cale, he will go to the valley. He will burn it to the ground to hide his crimes. My people are already dead, Cale roared, his face a mask of anguish. I cannot save them. I can only save you. I will not let you die for them. And I will not live if they die for me, she shot back, her voice raw. I am not your white woman burden anymore. Cale, I am not the excuse. If you run now, you are a coward. You are the very renegade they say you are. You will be running for the rest of your life. His face hardened, as if she had struck him. He had faced guns, arrows, and soldiers. But her words cut him to the bone, because they were true. She saw the change in his eyes, the resolve. To the valley, he said, his voice flat and dead. We rode to the valley. We will fight, and we will die. Or we will win, Lena said, her hand on his cheek. Sergeant Cole was on the other horse. Then we'd best ride like hell, and I have one last gift for you. Ma'am, he tossed her his own service pistol. You know how to use it. I will learn, she said. her hand closing around the cold metal. They rode as if the devil himself were on their tails. And he was... When Silas Kane discovered the escape, the empty cells, and his drugged, snoring guard, his rage was a palpable thing. He did not rave. He went cold. "He is not running," Kane said to the scarred man. "He is going home. He is going to fight." He turned to his assembled army of miners, mercenaries, and hired guns. "Gentlemen," he roared from the boardwalk, "the savage, Cale Nez, has escaped, and he has taken the woman again. He has proven his guilt, but this time he will not hide. We are going to his valley. We are going to burn him out. We are going to get our silver. And we are going to rescue Miss Hart, once and for all." A roar went up. This time, there was no pretense of law. There was only bloodlust. The army of over 100 men rode out, dragging 2 small field cannons, their wheels chewing up the dust. The valley was a frenzy of preparation. Cale and Lena had arrived an hour ahead of Kane's army, their horses lathered and dying. Cale's desperate. Shouted orders sent the village into motion. Old Bear was the calm center of the storm. "The women, the children, the old ones, into the caves, high up, where the spring begins. Take food, take water, be silent. He nodded to Cale, will lead the warriors. They will fight as the wolf fights. From the shadows, they will bleed them in the rocks." Lena refused to hide. "I'm not an old one," she said, her new pistol tucked in her waistband. "What can I do?" Tala grabbed her. "You can bind a wound. Come, we will need you." Lena worked, her hands sure and steady. She tore cloth for bandages. She helped the women move sacks of corn and dried meat into a central, fortified hogan, the food stores. She spoke to the terrified children, using the few Navajo words she knew, and teaching them one in English. "Help," she said. "If you see a blue coat, a real soldier, you say help. You understand?" They nodded, their black eyes wide, and then the lookouts signaled. They were coming. The attack began not with a charge, but with a bombardment. The 2 small cannons, set up at the mouth of the valley, began to lob shells. They were inaccurate, but terrifying. One shell exploded against the cliff face, sending rocks showering down. Another tore through a hogan, setting the dry wood instantly ablaze. Kane's army advanced behind the barrage, a long, disorganized line of men on horseback and on foot, firing their rifles at anything that moved. But the valley was empty. The Navajo were gone. The first line of miners, whooping and hollering, raced toward the empty village, eager for silver and blood. They reached the center of the village, and the earth erupted. Cale's warriors, hidden in trenches and behind rock falls, rose as one. 100 arrows hissed through the air. Men screamed and fell. The charge broke into chaos. Cale was a demon, a blur of motion, his face painted, his war club swinging. He was fighting for his land, for his people, for the woman who had shamed him into his own courage. And then, the heavens opened. The rain that had been threatening all morning, the remnants of the storm from weeks before, finally broke. It was not a gentle rain. It was a deluge. The dry, packed earth of the valley floor, already churned by the horses, turned instantly to a thick, clinging red mud. The cannons, the heavy wagons, the horses, they bogged down. The attackers' charge became a slow, sucking, desperate slog. The mud, the very earth of the valley, was fighting for the Navajo. Lena, in the storehouse hogan with Tala and 3 other women, watched through a slit in the wall. They were surrounded by the village's future. The seed corn, the dried meat. A group of mercenaries, cut off from the main force, saw the hogan. "They're in there," one shouted. "Seeing the women. And the food burn 'em all." A man with a wild beard and a torch ran forward. It was the miner from Red Rock, the one who had leered at her. He recognized her in the doorway. Well, he spat, his face lit by the torch. "The Injun's whore, I will burn you myself." He lunged, the torch held high, aiming for the dry roof. Lena did not think. She did not hesitate. She raised Sergeant Cole's pistol, both hands shaking, and pulled the trigger. The explosion was deafening inside the hogan. The man stopped. He looked down at the dark, spreading stain on his chest, a look of profound surprise on his face. He dropped the torch. It hissed out in the mud. He crumpled to his knees, and then fell forward. Lena stared at the pistol, at her smoking hand. She felt sick. She felt strong. She had killed a man. "Lena!" Tala shouted, pulling her back. "More are coming." The battle was turning. Sheer numbers were overwhelming the Navajo. Kale's warriors were being pushed back, foot by bloody foot. And then, a new sound. A bugle. A clear, sharp cavalry call. At the mouth of the valley, a new force appeared. It was not Kane's men. It was Sheriff Watson, his tarnished badge pinned to his chest. He was on a horse, and beside him was Sergeant Cole. Behind them were 20 townsmen, miners and merchants, the ones who had been in the hall, the ones who had heard Lena's words. "Hold your fire!" Watson roared, his voice surprisingly powerful. He was waving the oilskin pouch. Cole's evidence. "This attack is illegal. Silas Kane is a wanted man for fraud, conspiracy, and murder. I have the warrants, I have the proof." This was what the citizen part of the posse had been waiting for. The men who had come for silver, not for a massacre. They looked at the mud, at the dead. They looked at Kane, and they looked at the sheriff. They began to lower their rifles. The line wavered. Silas Kane, sitting on his horse on a small rise, watched his army, his plan, his entire empire, dissolve in the rain and mud. He was ruined. He looked across the battlefield, his eyes burning with a pure, unadulterated hatred. He saw Cale, fighting his way toward the sheriff. He saw the mercenaries falling back, and then he saw her, Lena, stepping out of the storehouse hogan, her pistol still in her hand, her face streaked with soot and fury. Kane's world narrowed to that one, single person, the woman who had done this, the one who had turned them all against him. "If I am to be ruined," he hissed to himself, "I will not be ruined alone." He spurred his horse, its hooves churning the mud. He galloped past the faltering lines, past the confused mercenaries. Lena saw him coming, raised her pistol, but he was too fast. He did not slow. He reached down, grabbing a fistful of her hair and her arm, and hauled her bodily onto the horse, her body thrown across the pommel. "Cale!" she screamed, her voice a desperate, terrified cry. Cale turned. He saw Kane, saw Lena in his arms, and he let out a roar, a sound that was not human. "Stop!" Kane bellowed, putting a pistol to Lena's head. "All of you stop or she dies." The battlefield went silent. The rain fell. "You want her, renegade!" Kane screamed, his voice cracking. "You want your whore, then you come and get her." He wheeled his horse, digging his spurs in, and galloped away from the battle, toward the high, winding path that led to the sacred cliff. Cale was on a fresh horse in seconds, one of the warrior's mounts, a rangy, wild-eyed stallion. He did not need a saddle. He did not need a bridle. He grabbed a handful of mane and kicked the animal into a desperate, lunging run. The path up the sacred cliff was narrow, a goat track carved into the sheer rock face. It was a place of prayer, not of horses. But Silas Kane's horse was scrambling up the trail, its iron-shod hooves slipping and sparking on the stone. He was a man driven by a madness that had consumed him, and he was dragging Lena with him. Cale followed. He was a better rider, his horse more sure-footed, but he had to keep his distance. The pistol at Lena's head was a fact he could not ignore. Below them, the battle had guttered out like a wet candle. The rain was easing, and in the sudden, eerie quiet, every combatant Navajo, miner, mercenary, and townsman looked up. They saw the three figures on the cliff, tiny silhouettes against the gray, weeping sky. The entire valley had become a theater, and the final, terrible act was playing out on the high ledge. Silas reached the top, a flat, wind-scoured sacred ledge that overlooked the entire valley. He dragged Lena from the horse, his arm locked around her throat, the pistol barrel pressed hard against her temple. His horse, its lungs heaving, stood nearby. Cale reined in his own mount 20 yards away. At the mouth of the path, he was trapped. He slid from the horse's back, his hand going to the pistol Cole had given him. He raised it. "Ah! Ah! Ah!" Silas screamed, his voice a ragged tear in the wind. He pressed the gun harder into Lena's skin. One move, renegade, and she goes over the side, or I paint the rock with her brains either way. You lose. Lena was not crying. She was rigid with terror, her eyes fixed on Cale. But she was not screaming. Cale held his position, the pistol steady, but he did not fire. The shot was too long. The risk was absolute. "This is why you always lose," Silas shrieked, his civilized mask completely gone, his face a mask of sweat, mud, and pure, unfiltered malice. "This is why my kind always beats your kind, because you—" He jabbed the gun at Cale. "You are a fool. You love this worthless patch of dirt. You love this woman." He laughed, a sound that broke apart in the wind. "You love things that can be taken from you. I love only one thing. Victory. I love winning. And I always win." He was raving. A man staring into his own ruin. "You think this is the first time I sold the Utes a story about peace while the army moved in from the south? I sold the Apache coordinates for their own sacred lands to a mining company in Denver. I bought and sold your entire worthless race for a single line of track, for a single bag of gold." He was breathing hard, his eyes wild. He was confessing to the sky, to the valley, to the woman he was about to kill. Cale's mind was a vortex. He saw an opening, a moment when Silas's arm wavered. He could shoot, he was a good shot, but the wind was high, a gust, a flinch, and Lena would be dead. Old Bear's voice echoed in his memory. A story told by the fire. "Do not take vengeance on the high places, my grandson. If your hand spills blood in hatred on the sacred cliff, our spirits will have no path home. The act will stain the land, and we will be lost." This was not a fight for land. It was a fight for his soul. If he killed Cain, here, like this, he would be a murderer, just as they said. He would win the battle, but he would lose his world. He was paralyzed, trapped between his love for Lena and his love for his people's way. And Lena saw it. She saw the agony in his face. She saw the tremble in his gun hand. She saw that he was trapped, just as he had been in the jail. He could not choose. She looked at Silas, the man whose arm was crushing her throat, his breath hot and foul on her cheek. She looked at his pistol, and she looked at the sheer 500-foot drop to the valley floor. She would not be the excuse. She had said it in the hall, and she meant it now. She would not be the pawn whose death started another massacre, or whose life destroyed a good man. Silas was still ranting. "I will build my railroad over your graves, I will." Lena, in a move of pure, desperate instinct, drove her elbow backward, with all her strength, into the soft flesh of his ribs. It was a small, sharp, brutal blow. Silas grunted, a sharp gasp of pain, his grip on her throat momentarily loosening. The hand with the pistol flinched, pulling away from her head for just 1 second. It was all she needed. "No!" she screamed, her voice a raw cry. "I will not be the excuse for another massacre." She broke free, shoving him, not toward the cliff, but sideways, breaking his balance. The pistol went off, the shot deafening, the bullet whining harmlessly into the sky. In that same instant, Cale fired. He did not aim for the man. He aimed for the gun. His bullet struck Silas's pistol, the impact sending the weapon flying from his grasp. Spinning over the cliff edge, it was all over in a second. Silas was disarmed. Lena was free. Cale was charging, but Silas was not done. He was a cornered animal. As Cale lunged, Silas did not try to run. He dove, low and hard, not at Cale, but at his legs, tackling him, his arms locking around Cale's waist. "If I go, you come with me. You savage bastard!" he screamed. They hit the slick rock, hard. They were a tangle of limbs, a desperate, rolling fight. Cale's head slammed against the stone. Silas was all teeth and nails, a rabid thing. He was trying to push them, Both of them, toward the edge. They were inches from the precipice. Cale could feel the empty air at his back. He could see the valley floor, so far below. Silas was strong, his body wiry and fueled by a lifetime of pure greed. He had one arm locked around Cale's neck, the other scrabbling for purchase on the rock. His scrabbling hand hit something, a small, leather pouch. It was the pouch of gold he carried on his belt, the one that had been torn loose in the fight. It had spilled a few small, dull yellow nuggets onto the rock. Silas's eyes, which had been fixed on Cale's, darted to the gold. It was a fatal, final flicker of his true nature. His grip on Cale's neck loosened. His mind, even in a fight for his life, was diverted by the thing he loved most. He grunted, his hand releasing Cale's shirt, his fingers stretching, trying to claw back the spilled gold. "Mine," he hissed. He leaned too far. His hand, full of gravel and two small nuggets, found no purchase. His body, overbalanced, tipped, Cale, his lungs screaming for air, his vision gray. Simply let go. He did not push, he did not strike, he just released his hold. Silas's eyes went wide. He had a moment, a single, terrible moment of understanding. He had not been defeated by the warrior. He had been defeated by his own hand, reaching for his own greed. He fell. He did not scream. He was just a dark, falling shape, vanishing into the gray mist that was rising from the valley floor. The silence that fell on the sacred ledge was absolute. It was the silence of the beginning of the world. Lena stood, her body a single, shaking line, her hands over her mouth. Cale did not move. He lay on the rock, inches from the edge, his chest heaving, his eyes closed. The rain began to fall again, a soft, cleansing mist, washing the mud and the blood from the stone. Down in the valley, a single, collective sigh seemed to rise from the crowd. The villain was dead. The fight was over. Lena's legs gave way. She sank to her knees. Cale opened his eyes. He pushed himself up, his body bruised and aching. He looked at the empty space where Silas had been. He looked at his own hands. They were scraped and raw, but there was no vengeful blood on them. He was not a murderer. He was a survivor. He crawled, then stumbled, to where Lena knelt. He did not say a word. He just reached down, his hands gentle, and pulled her to her feet. She fell against him, her body convulsing in a storm of sobs, a release of all the terror, all the rage, all the fear. She buried her face in his chest, her fists clutching his torn, muddy shirt. His arms went around her. He held her, his own body shaking with reaction. He held her as if she were the only solid thing in a world that had just tried to spin apart. He buried his face in her wet, wild hair. And for the first time since he was a child, he closed his eyes and just held on. When they finally made their way down the path, the valley was a changed place. The fighting had stopped. Kane's mercenaries were throwing down their guns, hands raised. The miners who had come for silver looked dazed, standing in the mud, as Sheriff Watson, Sergeant Cole, and a few Navajo warriors disarmed them. Old Bear was standing in the center of the village, his face grave. He and Sheriff Watson met in the middle of the muddy, trampled ground. There was no victory. There was only, afterward, "There will be no more killing," Old Bear announced, his voice carrying in the quiet. "The man who brought the war is gone. Any man who lays down his gun will be treated fairly," Sheriff Watson called, his voice raw with exhaustion. "But you will not leave. Not yet." Old Bear looked at the crowd of defeated miners. "You came to tear the earth. Now, you will stay to heal it. You will help us rebuild the hogans you burned. You will help us replant the corn you trampled. There will be no vengeance. There will only be work." It was a judgment of profound, simple wisdom. Not a hanging, not a prison, but restoration, a future. Cale and Lena walked through the crowd, their hands still linked. They stopped in the shadow of the smoking, ruined storehouse. They were both covered in mud, soot, and blood. They were exhausted. They were alive. Lena looked up at him, her eyes clear and blue, searching his. She was trembling. "I thought," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I thought love was a lie, a word men used. Like Robert, like Cain." Cale looked down at her. He saw the woman who had faced a lieutenant, who had pulled a trigger to save a child, who had elbowed a killer to save him. He saw her, not the white woman, not the burden, just Lena. "Maybe it was," he said, his voice rough. His thumb brushed a streak of mud from her cheek. "Maybe it was just a word. Until we chose it." She rose up on her toes. He leaned down. It was not a kiss of passion. It was not a kiss of triumph or possession. It was a kiss that was as quiet and necessary as breathing. It was the first breath after drowning. It was a promise. It was two survivors, two outcasts, finding a new, solid ground in the space between their two ruined worlds. It was the only truth left. The rain fell for 2 more days. It was a cold, quiet rain. A baptism and a burial all in one. The valley was a sea of red mud, and the work was grim. They buried the dead first. Navajo and white. They were not buried together, but they were buried with a shared, exhausted dignity. The war was over, and the dead were just dead. The Hogan, where Lena had first been held, the place of her terror, became a makeshift hospital. She worked there, side by side with Tala and the other Navajo women. Her hands, which had been trained to hold a pen, now learning to hold a suturing needle. Her first patient was a miner, a young man from Ohio with a shock of blonde hair, who had taken an arrow in the thigh. He was one of the men who had been shouting, "Hang him," in the town hall. He woke from a laudanum-laced daze to find her cleaning his wound. His eyes widened in terror. You're hurt," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "The Injun's woman." "I am Lena," she said, her voice quiet, not looking up from her work. "And you are lucky. The arrow missed the bone. You will walk again." "But why are you—" he stammered. "After what we did." Lena stopped. She met his confused, fearful gaze. "Because the war is over, and I am a terrible washer, but I am a decent nurse." "Now hold still. This will sting." He stared at her, his face a mask of confusion. As she efficiently and gently bandaged his leg, he had come here for silver, lied to by a rich man, and was now being saved by the woman he had been ready to see hanged. The world no longer made any sense. In Red Rock, Sheriff Watson, with a spine newly straightened by the events in the valley, was a man reborn. He, Sergeant Cole, an old bear, with Cale as a translator, met in the sheriff's office. The oilskin pouch was on the desk. "I have sent my report," Watson declared, his voice firm. He had 3 deputies now, townsmen who had fought beside him. "Sent it by wire from the Army Telegraph at Fort Wingate. Sergeant Cole is my witness. My report will state that Silas Kane, wanted for multiple counts of fraud and conspiracy to commit murder, was killed while resisting a lawful arrest. His private army has been disbanded. The territorial governor will not like it, but he cannot argue with the dead." Sergeant Cole nodded. "My own report to the Army states the same. Lieutenant Brody has been confined to quarters, pending an inquiry. The Army does not like being made a fool of, and it really does not like being used as a private army for a dead civilian." Old Bear, sitting with a quiet dignity, listened. Cale translated. Then, the old man spoke. "The railroad," he said simply. "The railroad," Watson agreed. "My report, and the testimony of Miss Hart, which I have taken, makes it very clear that the route through the valley was based on fraudulent claims. The company will have to reroute. They will go north," Cale said. "Through the high pass. It will cost them more money, but it is the only way." "Then there is an agreement," Watson said, offering a hand to Old Bear. "The railroad goes north. Your valley, your Danita, is yours. The law will honor its border." Old Bear did not take his hand. He placed his own hand over his heart. "We will honor the law," he said, translated by Cale. "When the law honors the land, we will allow the trade road to pass. We will trade our corn and our wool. But the valley remains ours. This is the way it will be." Watson, understanding, nodded. It was not a perfect peace. It was not a grand treaty of brotherhood. It was a hard-fought, realistic, and fragile truce. It was the best they could hope for. 3 weeks passed. The mud dried. The first of the rebuilt hogans went up. The new, pale wood of the frames a sign of a future. The prisoners, the miners who had been forced to work, had been released. Most had slunk away. Their dreams of silver turned to mud. A few, including the young man from Ohio, had stayed, awkward and quiet, offering to work for food until they could find their way. And Lena was in limbo. The stagecoach was running again, and it brought the mail. There was a letter for her, from her father. It was a frantic, terrified, angry letter. The first reports, the ones based on Kane's lies, had reached the east, kidnapped by savages. Red Rock school teacher feared dead. Your mother has been prostrate with grief. Her father wrote, his elegant script shaky with emotion. We do not understand what possessed you to go to that godless place. I have sent a draft for $50. You are to board the very next coach. Return to the train and come home. We cannot have the Hart name associated with this scandal. Come home, Lena. Come home and we will forget this madness ever happened. Lena folded the letter, her hands cold. Forget it happened. Go back to Philadelphia. Be the disgraced daughter, be pitied, and lie every day, for the rest of her life. She would have to sit in parlors and listen to men talk of progress and manifest destiny, and she would have to nod and be silent. She would have to be the proper lady they all expected. Then, a delegation came from Red Rock. Not men, this time. It was the widow who had been on the stagecoach, her face softer now, and 2 of the merchants' wives. Miss Hart, the widow said, her hands clasped. We were wrong about everything. What you did in that hall. It was the bravest thing I have ever seen. Red Rock is a different place now. It is a real town. It deserves a real school. We would be honored if you would come. We have a small house for you. We will pay, whatever you ask. It was everything she had wanted when she first came west. A school, a house, respect, safety. But she looked at them, at their black bombazine dresses, and she felt distant. That night, she sat with Tala, grinding corn. The white women want you in their town, Tala said, not a question. Yes, the old women here. Tala jested to the Hogans. They want you too. They say the children are speaking your name. They say it is good for the children to know the paper words. To fight the white man with his own tricks. So, Lena said, her back aching, her hands raw from the grinding. I have 3 choices. I can be a liar in a silk dress in the east. I can be a respectable schoolmarm in a town of new-made hypocrites. Or I can be this, a grinder of corn. You are not a grinder of corn, Tala said, her voice sharp. You are the woman who shot the man with the torch. You are the woman who faced Kane. The white women see a teacher. My people see a warrior in a strange, pale body. They are both wrong. They are both right. The choice is, who do you see? The question haunted her. That night, Cale found her by the creek. She was standing where she had first bathed, where she had whispered, "Don't look." He stood beside her, not touching her, just watching the water. The mail came, she said. I know. My father wants me to go home. The town wants me to be their teacher. I know. The children here. Tala says they want me to stay. They do, he said. His voice was quiet. She waited. She waited for him to say it. I want you to stay. She waited for him to demand it, to claim her, to tell her what to do. Robert would have told her it was her duty to leave. Silas Kane would have locked her in a room. She turned to him, her frustration a sharp, sudden pain. And you, Cale, what do you want? Am I still your white woman burden? Am I the spoil of your war? What am I to you? He was silent for a long moment, the sound of the creek filling the air. Then he turned to face her. His eyes were dark, but she could see the fear in them. Not fear of a gun, fear of this. When he lost the Billigana woman, Cale said, his voice rough. He lost himself. He was defined by her. When she left, he was nothing. He was an outcast from both sides. I will not do that, to you or to me. He took a small step back, creating a space between them. I will not make you a prisoner. Lena, I will not make you my prize. If you want to go home, I will ride with you. I will put you on the train myself. I will guard you with my life until that door is closed. And I will know that you are safe. And I will let you go. He looked at her, his heart in his eyes, and it was a look of pure, terrifying respect. I will not bind you. That is not our way, and it is not my way. Lena looked at him, and the last of her old self, the old, frightened, dependent Lena Hart, fell away. Robert had offered her lies and possession. Cain had offered her a cage. The town offered her a respectable, safe box. Cale was offering her the most terrifying thing of all. A choice. A real one. She began to cry. Not in sorrow or in fear, but in a profound, earth-shattering release. He was not like them. He was not like any man she had ever known. He was offering her freedom, the very thing she had come west to find, not knowing what it looked like. You are a fool, Calnez, she whispered, her voice thick with tears. I know, he said, his own voice breaking. You are not supposed to let me go. You are supposed to tell me to stay. I am asking you to choose, he said. She stepped into the space he had made, her hands coming up to rest on his chest. I cannot go home. Cale, I cannot lie. I cannot be that person. The town, then, he said, his face rigid. It is a good offer. You would be safe. Safe, she said, the word tasting like ash. I do not want to be safe. I want to be me, and I do not know who me is. Not yet, but I know she is not in Red Rock. She looked up at him, her blue eyes clear and fierce. I am not staying because I have nowhere else to go. I am not staying because you are my savior. I am staying because I choose to. I am staying because this is the first place that has ever felt like the truth. She took a deep breath. I will build a school. Here, by the creek. I will teach your children, and I will teach any child from Red Rock who is brave enough to come. I will be the bridge. Cale, that is my choice. He did not move for a long second, and then his arms went around her, pulling her so tight she could barely breathe. He buried his face in her hair. Then I will choose. Too. I choose you. The next day, Old Bear found them by the creek, already pacing out the ground for the new school. He watched them, his eyes full of a deep, old wisdom. It is not our way, he said to Cale. For a man to take a Billigana wife, it is not their way for a woman to take a Navajo husband. It is a hard road. We know, Lena said, her hand finding Cale's. It must be done, Old Bear said, a small smile touching his lips. But it must be done, in a new way. Not a white wedding, not a Navajo ceremony, a ceremony of the bridge. We will have a blessing. We will ask the earth and the sky to witness. We will invite our new friends. He looked toward the trail to Red Rock. Tala, he called. Go to the town. Tell Sheriff Watson. Tell the women. Tell them. There is a joining, and they are invited. The schoolhouse was made of new-cut pine and hope. It smelled of sawdust and chalk. It stood on the bank of the creek, just where the valley floor began to rise toward the cliffs. It had one room, one door, 2 big windows, and a real blackboard, hauled by wagon from Santa Fe at Sergeant Cole's own expense. 6 months had passed. The snows of a mild winter had come, blessed the valley with moisture, and melted, feeding the creek. The land was green. The scars of the fire were still there, dark patches on the earth, but new grass was pushing up through the ash. Inside the school, Lena Hart, or perhaps Lena Nez. The name was still new on her tongue, stood before the blackboard. She wore a simple buckskin dress, a gift from the women, her hair in a long, practical braid. She was teaching the letter B. B, she said, her voice clear. Buh, as in bear, Old Bear! A dozen children, ranging in age from 5 to 15, sat on the rough wooden benches. They were mostly Navajo, but today there were 3 white children as well. They were the children of the new blacksmith in Red Rock, a man who had heard the story and decided this was a place a man could raise a family right. A small Navajo boy, his face serious, pointed. "But," he said, "like Bilagana." Lena laughed, a sound that was full and easy now. "Yes, exactly. Like Bilagana." A shadow fell in the doorway. Cale stood there, leaning against the jamb. He was not in war paint. He was in simple leggings and a worn linen shirt, his arms crossed, a quiet smile on his face. He had been checking the new irrigation ditch they had dug with the Ohio miner, the one who had stayed. "You are teaching them wrong," he said, his voice a low tease. Lena turned, her hand on her hip. "Oh, and what does the great warrior know of the alphabet?" "I know," he said, walking into the room, his presence filling the small space. "That B is also for bowed away. It means he is leaving, which you are not." He moved to the blackboard, picked up the chalk, and wrote a Navajo word next to her B. His letters were crude, but strong. "And this," he said to the children in their own tongue, "means she who talks too much." The children giggled. Lena swatted his arm with her hand. "You are interrupting the lesson. Mr. Nez." "I am adding to the lesson. Mrs. Nez," he countered, his black eyes dancing. He leaned in, his voice dropping so only she could hear, his breath warm on her ear. "And I will add to your lessons tonight, when the children are asleep." A flush rose on her neck. "Get out of my schoolroom," she whispered, pushing him, and he laughed, a quiet, deep sound, and left. The valley was alive. The burned hogans had been rebuilt, stronger this time. The corn was planted in new, richer rows. The trade with Red Rock was steady. Men came, but they came unarmed. Their wagons full of coffee and flour and needles and news, and they left with wool and woven blankets and turquoise. They came to the valley, but they did not come for the valley. The truce, born of blood and fire, was holding. That night, they climbed. The air was cool and sweet with the smell of juniper. They climbed the narrow path, their hands linked, up to the sacred ledge, the place where Silas Kane had fallen. It was no longer a place of fear. It was just a place of wind and stars. They sat, their backs against a warm slab of stone, and Cale wrapped a single, heavy wool blanket around them both, pulling her close. His arm was a solid, warm weight around her. For a long time, they just watched the sky. The stars were so bright, so close. They looked like holes punched in a black, velvet sky. "Do you remember?" Lena whispered, her head resting on his shoulder. "That night by the creek, after the hotel." "I remember," he said. "I was so terrified, so ashamed of my own body, of you seeing me." She was quiet for a moment. "I said, 'Don't look.'" She felt him smile in the darkness, the rumble of his chest. "And I said I would look forever, in my memory." He turned her face to his hand gentle on her chin. "But you were wrong, Lena. Wrong. You said don't look, but I was always looking. I did not see a naked white woman. I did not see a victim. I saw a fire. I saw the woman who had faced a lieutenant. I saw the woman who had stood in the hall and called a killer a liar, even when she knew it would hang her. I was not looking at your skin. Lena, I was looking at your courage, and I have never, ever stopped looking at it." He kissed her, and in the moonlight, on the sacred cliff, their shadows, which had been two, merged. They became one dark, singular shape against the stars. It was a kiss of promise and of fact and of a life that was finally and fully being lived. It was a quiet consummation, a merging of two souls who had fought their way through hell to find this single, quiet patch of earth. Lena had come west looking for freedom. She had thought freedom meant being alone, being dependent on no one. She had been wrong. She looked at the man holding her. Freedom was not running away. Freedom was choosing, every single day, the ground you would stand on, and the person you would stand with. Love, she knew now, was not a story from a book. It was not a grand, fated passion. It was a choice. It was a promise. It was the hard, daily, sometimes brutal work of seeing the truth and speaking the truth and holding on. It was the promise you made, new, every single morning. A sound, distant but clear, drifted on the night air. The toot of a steam whistle, the new railroad line. It was running now, but it was far to the north, going around the high pass, just as Cale had said. It was progress. But it was progress that had learned respect. A wild herd of horses, their coats gleaming in the moonlight, ran across the valley floor below, their hoofbeats a drumbeat of the old, free world. The two sounds, the train and the horses, did not fight. They simply coexisted. The world was changing, but here, in this valley, they had found a balance. The mail wagon, which now came to the valley, had brought more than just chalk. It had brought letters. One was for Tala. She had been taking English lessons from Lena, every day, her quick mind absorbing everything. The letter was an acceptance to a mission school in Santa Fe, one that trained translators for the government. "They want me to go," Tala had said, her eyes bright, a little scared. "To be a real bridge, like you, Lena." Another letter had been for Sheriff Watson. It was from the territorial governor. It was an official commendation. His report, backed by Sergeant Coles, had been accepted. Silas Kane was officially a criminal. The town of Red Rock was officially a model of cooperation and peaceful accord. Watson, the man who had been a coward, was now, officially, a hero. And there had been a letter for Cale, and for Lena, written in a rough hand. "I am at Fort Apache." It said, "They moved my whole company. I'm not sorry to be gone from Red Rock. I hear the valley is quiet. I am glad. What happened there? It taught me that a man's conscience is a heavy thing. It is better to carry it right. I think of you all. I think of Old Bear. Tell him, his kindness was not wind against a hurricane. It was the rock that broke the storm. Your friend." Sergeant Cole. A few days later, a new family had arrived on the stage, the same one Lena had taken. A mother, a father, and a daughter of about 20, come to meet her brother who was working the false silver claim. The girl, who was named Sarah, had found her way to the school, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and excitement at the Navajo children. She found Lena drawing water from the creek. "Are you Miss Hart?" the girl asked. "The one. I am Lena Nez," Lena said, her smile gentle. "Oh," the girl said, blushing. I have heard so much. My goodness, it is all very romantic." "It was not romantic," Lena said, her voice kind but firm. But you are married to him," the girl whispered, as if the very rocks could hear. "My goodness, are you not afraid?" "Afraid of what?" "Well," the girl fumbled, "of loving the wrong person, of what people will say, of it all being a terrible mistake." Lena looked at the girl. So young, so full of the same fears she herself had once had. She thought of Robert and of Cain and of the long road that had brought her here. She smiled. I used to think love was a lie. A story people told to get what they wanted. A word to hide their greed. She looked over at the school, where Cale was now, impossibly, teaching the children how to make a proper bow. "Now," Lena said, turning back to the girl, "I think it is a promise. It is the hardest promise in the world, but it is the only one that matters. It is a promise you choose to make, new, every single morning." That night, the fire burned bright in the center of the village. The children were asleep, rolled in their blankets. The coyotes were singing on the ridge, their voices a high, lonely, and beautiful song, a harmony with the wind. Lena sat with her back against Cale's chest, his arms around her, their hands laced together over the small, gentle swell of her belly. She remembered that first night, The terror, the cold, the feeling of being exposed. A naked, terrified virgin, cowering by a stream. She remembered her own whispered words. She smiled, a slow, secret smile. She leaned her head back against his shoulder, her heart full. "You can look now," she whispered, her voice soft in the firelight. "At all of it, at us, at this life." He kissed the top of her head, his grip tightening, holding her, anchoring her. "I told you," he murmured, his voice a vow against her hair. "I'll look forever. Thank you so much for listening to our story. Where in the world are you listening from? Let us know in the comments. We would love to hear your thoughts. Please subscribe to Wild West Tales. Like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach more listeners.